Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Claris Engage Beyond. I'm Rosemary Tucci, your host for today's session of Security and Compliance, an Inside Look with Andrew Lacates, Director of Product Marketing and Community at Claris, leading the discussion. Before we get started, let me review some general housekeeping items to help you have the best experience during today's WebEx. We've put the WebEx support contact information in the chat. If you have any technical problems during the event today, please use the US phone number or follow the link to get an international support phone number. And we do have time at the end of this panel for Q&A to the panelists. And to do that, you can use the three dots in the lower right to open the Q&A panel and choose all panelists to send your questions. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Andrew Lacates, to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Rosemary. Really appreciate the introduction, and thank you everyone for coming here today. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in the list of attendees, and I know some of you are getting up early to be here, others may be late, but thank you so much for your time. This is a topic that we tend to come back to every single year. It's a critical sort of foundational topic that we have to talk about every year, largely because of the evolution of the threat landscape that's out there. Security is absolutely critical, and maybe now more than ever. I don't know if y'all are aware, but I saw this morning on the community channel that there's actually somebody out there who's sending emails and phishing, pretending to be Brad Freitag. Like, that's happening. There's an underground battle going on between hackers from the US and across the world that's invisible to most of us, but these things are happening, right? There are real threats out there, and it's really just an interesting time. So I think it's almost in a way bad, but perfect timing that we're having this discussion right now. And I'm joined by some really great people here that I'm honored to be with. I'll start, let's do a round of quick introductions, and let's start with our Claris representatives today. Starting with our visionary on the product team who's been here talking about the security topic with us last year and throughout, and that is Sangeeta Banerjee. Sangeeta, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Andrew, and hello everyone. My name is Sangeeta Banerjee, and I'm the Senior Manager for Product Management here at Claris. I've been almost over 4 years now working on FileMaker Cloud, Claris Connect, and have been driving some of the key security initiatives here. So prior to Claris, I have worked at Oracle, startups, and as Andrew mentioned, security is always a hot topic. And I was in the panel discussion last year, and I'm really excited to be here this year among the experts. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sangeeta. And a new name probably for many of the attendees here today, but we wanted to really bring an expert from our development team, and she is Elaine Suen. Elaine, would you introduce yourself?
Yes. Thank you, Andrew, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine. I'm really honored and excited to be here to join the other panelists to talk about these very important topics. So I'm a senior manager at Claris, leading the DevOps team. My team is responsible for CI/CD pipelines, cloud service operations, which include like infrastructure setup, deployment, monitoring, incident handling, and etc. So it is a team behind the scene that's keeping our cloud services in healthy and secure states. Thank you.
We appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much, Elaine, for coming. And then we also have two panelists today with us who are industry experts from our partner community. I'll start with my good friend and colleague who I've known for decades now, Mr. Chris Moyer. Chris, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Chris Moyer. I co-own the Moyer Group with Heidi Porter. We're a Claris Platinum partner. And several years ago, we actually had a client get hit with a ransomware attack, and we were fortunately able to get them back up and running because we had an offsite backup for their database. But it made us start to pay more attention to this space. And after that, we started attending the DEF CON security conference in Las Vegas, which is not to be confused with DevCon.
Right on. Well, thank you for joining us. Just a few weeks ago, I was privileged to join the Pause on Error conference, which was in the mountains of North Georgia, not but a couple hours from my home. At that conference, Chris and Heidi Porter and Wim DeCorte presented or co-presented a session regarding security and the threat landscape. And I think one of your goals there, Chris, was to scare the pants off of us or something like that, right?
It is Halloween.
It kind of worked. And so I appreciate you joining us here as well to share some of that same knowledge. And then finally, another panelist from last year's session returning to us, but who is an expert working for Lusterius. It provides hosting services as well as consulting services, is our friend and colleague, Koen van Hulle. Koen, would you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Koen van Hulle. I'm working already 20 years as a Claris consultant for Lusterius. Lusterius is a Claris partner in Europe, and we have offices all over Europe. And I'm leading a dedicated team who is managing FileMaker servers in our hosting and on-premise at client sites and in the client's infrastructure. And we help onboarding clients in Claris Cloud as well.
Awesome, thank you. Well, before we dive in deeply, I've got lots of questions for the panel today. I wanted to start with some statements that we made at the kickoff for Engage Beyond just a few weeks ago with Brad and with Peter and myself. Regarding Claris's strong commitment towards IT acceptance or IT friendliness, right? It is absolutely critical in the modern era that we are a trusted platform for the businesses that use the Claris platform. And that goes for small, mid-size, and enterprise companies just equally so, right? And part of that commitment to IT acceptance, goes to many things outside of security, like the openness of the platform, the ability to integrate with any of the data systems a customer may have, the ability to extend the capabilities with it using the tools and the code and things that their IT departments already have. But fundamentally, security is it's foundational. It's critical that those companies can trust our platform now more than ever. And given the sort of complexities in the platform and how it's evolved from on-prem to cloud and hybrid and everything in between, it can be hard to sort of assess and understand all that. So I guess we have to start from the place that Claris wants to do its best to be a secure and trusted platform. That's a given. And then I guess the changing nature of the security focus is critical to understand as well. I was just watching a couple weeks ago the security session that I believe Tim Neudecker provided at DevCon or Engage, which was it in 2019. And there, the primary focus was what we have been talking about for many decades: how to manage users, their access, passwords and accounts and privilege structures and things like that. It was all very internal, if you will, to FileMaker applications. But today, I think we're going to speak a little more broadly. So I want to talk a little bit about threat landscape. And let me do that by starting with Chris, because you did have that presentation at Pause a couple of weeks back. Can you give us some of your perspectives on the evolving threat landscape, Chris, and what concerns you these days?
Yeah, so to us, we feel strongly that ransomware is the most significant and definitely rapidly growing IT threat in general. And because it's a general IT threat, it's also a threat to FileMaker server and where it's deployed. Just some quick stats. By the end of the year, there will be a ransomware attack every 11 seconds. Back in 2016, it was every 40 seconds. So it doesn't sound like much, but it's a growing thing. Ransomware gangs are now actively recruiting people to compromise their own organizations in exchange for a cut of the ransom. So now you have a situation where you could be doing everything right, have airtight perimeter security, great internal phishing awareness, which is timely as of today, and then you can still get taken down by an unhappy employee. So that's kind of terrifying. And then ransomware historically has been pretty focused on the Windows ecosystem. So in the past, hosting FileMaker server on a Mac or on a Linux machine gave you some measure of protection. But with so much money, there's hundreds of millions of dollars flowing to these gangs every year. And so with all those resources, they can afford to invest in increasing their reach to Mac OS and Linux, and they have been. Right now, there's an endpoint vendor, and they also do anti-phishing stuff called Acronis. And they're having their CyberFit Security Summit right now. And yesterday they mentioned that new macOS malware increased by 1,157% last year. And that in September, just a few weeks ago, they blocked 27% more threats on macOS and 31% more threats on Linux. So macOS and Linux threats are definitely on the rise. And then one more point, I don't want to take too much time here, but a lot of people or maybe banking on security through obscurity, thinking they're just too small a fish to be bothered with by the ransomware gangs. But after the dark side attack on Colonial Pipeline this year, they being DarkSide, put out a press release stating that this was a failure of vetting. They don't want to get the US government cyber command breathing down their necks. They took down their servers, they captured their crypto wallets, they got put on a US Treasury sanctions list, which means it's illegal to even pay a ransom to these people. You cannot conduct business with the gang. And so that's a problem. And as a result, they could no longer operate as DarkSide. They had to change their name to Black Matter. So they actually prefer smaller organizations that don't bring that kind of outcome. And the problem is that these medium-sized organizations that are kind of juicy targets that don't have a lot of political clout, those have a significant overlap with Claris's customer base. And just one final factoid, in 2021, the average ransom paid for a mid-sized organization is slightly above 170,000. And 80% of those who pay the ransom get a subsequent attack. So it's just a bad situation all the way around.
So you're doing a good job of scaring the pants off of us. This is a good start. Thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. One thing that stands out for me that you just said is that, many of us who have used platforms other than Windows or use multiple platforms, there's the notion of security versus safety. And I have a friend that actually works in security, and we've had conversations about, whether the Mac was as secure as a platform like Windows. And it's different. I guess the analogy is your house. Like, how many locks do you have on your front door, and what is your neighborhood? There's a difference between securing the front door and living in a safe neighborhood, right? But it's the sounds like the playing field is leveling a bit, and the safe neighborhoods maybe aren't as safe as they used to be. Is that fair?
That's fair to say.
As an aside, I was traveling internationally recently and stayed at a vacation rental by owner house. And the door had a cool little lock that every time you would twist it, another bolt would shut the door. And it really made me wonder about the neighborhood I was staying in, because there were like 5 bolts on that door. There was no way anybody was getting through it. I thought, well, this seems secure, but I'm not sure I'm in a safe place. Okay, second point, though, is that, I think small businesses might feel like they can be secure, that nobody's going to know who I am to attack me. I'm not a big, juicy target. But you're saying rather the opposite, that the larger organizations may be better equipped to defend against security issues and ultimately be less attractive to a hacker. So the small businesses need to be just as concerned. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I have been having a back channel conversation about how that worldwide hacker community is screaming that they're getting too much heat from the feds these days. And that's exactly the issue. If they, go too high on the food chain, those people have the ability to bring blowback to them. And so they're trying to stay below that threshold. All
right. Kevin, let's see if you can equally scare our audience. I just would love to hear your perspective on this as well. As a hosting provider, I'm sure you work with a lot of customers of various sizes. So yeah, how do you perceive the threat landscape and its evolution in recent years?
Well, there's a second threat that popped up, and that's with COVID. With COVID, everyone have to stay at home, businesses were closed, and people wanted to work further. And the first concern was to get the business up and running. So everyone without any policies started up opening services to get back to work, Zoom, all kinds of collaboration tools, and so on. And the data is, your data of an organization is scattered. And what you see now when the business is coming back to normal is that now, again, people have to reevaluate and coming back to policies, IT organizations pulling back certain things. But in the beginning, we had a lot of requests from clients. So can you put just or a FileMaker server somewhere available on the cloud or on the internet, and just opening firewall ports and so on, but also sharing documents with privacy information just in all kind of tools that were not made for it, but people use it to be able to get back in business. And now this data is there somewhere. So there's a big step in re-evaluating these things and going back to a safe and good mode.
So that's an interesting observation about kind of an unintended consequence of the pandemic, that with more people moving quickly to remote and having to reconfigure access to their systems, that you're essentially opening doors. You have to be, right? And you need to protect those equally. But we kind of had to rush to get remote, and maybe people didn't do that especially well. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. All right, let's turn to some positives. Let's see if we can bring our mood back up a little bit. Sangeeta, love to chat with you about your view as a thought leader in our organization, and on the topic of security, on the threat landscape, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that Claris is doing. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Thank
So, as Cohen and Chris already mentioned, and I'm going to talk about the top 6 challenges that is on the threat landscape. The first one being the phishing attacks. It has doubled more than the last year mostly because of the pandemic situation. And then there is the ransomware, malware, data leakage, weak passwords, and insider threat. So these are the top 6 challenges that we see in the threat landscape. And as Cohen already mentioned, given the COVID situation, the remote access to the tools have increased exponentially. And not to forget about the role of shadow IT in the threat landscape. So that is why what you will see is the zero trust policy and the security awareness training have become so important. Now, if you remember, Andrew, in the last year's session, Wim Decote covered a lot about the threat landscape. And since then, Claris has made significant investments in getting security certifications and reports like SOC 2 and ISO.
We have, and we talked about that a little bit. As we're doing it, for me at least, SOC was a very new concept. I know we've been talking about it for some time, that it was a big investment, but can you help define a little bit what SOC 2 is for our audience, so folks out there that don't understand it have a better idea what we did?
Sure. So SOC 2 stands for Service Organization Controls 2, is a report. It is not a certification, and it provides the details about the internal controls in place in a service organization to protect customer data. It applies to cloud services only, so the service organizations are the cloud service providers. Now, SOC 2 Type 2 is an attestation report that is issued by a third-party auditor in where they express their opinion whether or not the service organization met the trust service criteria over a given period of time, which is minimum 6 months. Now, these trust service criteria are security, availability, confidentiality, process integrity, and privacy. And they were established by AICPA, that is American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Now, I'm happy to share that Claris got its first SOC 2 Type 2 report for Claris Connect. Now, Claris Connect received a clean report in the 3 trust service criteria it sought, that is security, availability, and confidentiality. And Claris and Apple worked together, and they put an army behind it and collaborated with our third-party audit firm, KPMG, to obtain the report. Now, this is not a one-time report. It is an ongoing process. Now, if you want to take a look at the report, you can send a request to compliance@claris.com, and our legal team will get an NDA signed and watermark the report with the customer name before sending it out. Now, there is one thing that I would like to mention, that if you were to take a look at the report, besides the different sections of the internal controls and the processes we have in place, there is a section that talks about the relationship and the shared responsibility between Apple and Claris, and how the teams together put their services to protect the cloud environment.
Right on. That's a lot. But let me ask you a couple of simple questions. One that struck me as I was originally learning about it, that you said a SOC is not a certification per se. It is a report following an audit that expresses an attestation that we're doing the right stuff.
Yes.
Is that right? And sorry, I had another question and it just melted from my brain. Let's shift gears then while I rethink of it. Yeah, let's shift gears for a moment to Elaine, because I'd like to actually understand a little bit about what we had to do to earn that attestation. Is that okay? Elaine, can you talk to us a little bit about what our teams are doing, your job, your responsibilities, and how we were audited?
Oh, yes, definitely. So my team, we put in multiple resources and through multiple quarters to undergo this audit. It's a very rigorous process just because it holds our reputation. It kind of measures in our maturity in security handling. So, actually before the audit, we have a lot of controls in place, but through this audit that we, formalized and closed some minor gaps and enhanced our documentation. But just to talk about all the controls are in place. We have security by design. So we have security features designed as in the product. So it's not like it's a coincidence. No. We have software development lifecycle process that you go through design, you go through implementation, testing phases, and everything just to make sure you have processing integrity to some extent. We have change management. Not everything happens by accident. It's all planned, it's tested, it's scoped, and it's controlled. We have separation of duties in the cloud, especially, we have developer, we have QA, we have DevOps. Everybody has their own different responsibilities. And so, but within this maintained control that, things not go across the boundaries. We have access control to source code repositories and to the environments, especially the production environment. It's very tight and limited. It's on a need-to-know basis. Not everybody say, hey, I like to access the environment, then you would get it. It has to go through the approval process. We have two-factor authentication, not just the strong password, but you have to go through it, through phone or through email or something to get in. We also have that by default for our customers. We have encryption, whether the data is being transmitted or at rest. So if somebody got hold of your physical device or whatever, it won't work. And we have web application firewall. We have endpoint security. We have disaster recovery plan. We have infrastructure incident handling process and handbook. We have a security incident handling as well. So anything that happens, we know what to do. And we have handling and a very firm defined process. We always use leading edge technologies and state of the art tools, that especially anything related to security. Bottom line, we have dedicated teams around the globe, 24/7 for infrastructure and security monitoring and handling. So it's upfront from the very beginning to the very end that, there are people involved, there are processes involved. We have tight control.
Awesome. If I were to summarize all that in one statement, I believe that the SOC 2 audit followed hundreds of controls that your team executes on. Is that correct?
Yes, it's
So
very
comprehensive.
rigorous, very comprehensive. And also the auditors actually do an excellent job. They say, oh, you say you do this, show me the proof. So there are a lot of things that it's very hard to show the proof because, we put in the monitoring, but then there was no incident or anything alert caught by the monitoring. So how do we prove that? We have to show them the source code. They have to check whether it's installed or not. So it's a very, very rigorous process.
Awesome. You did mention something that triggered me remembering the dumb question I was going to ask earlier, which is that the SOC 2 audit is for cloud properties only. It's about the services we provide. It's not about a given product, and it would not apply to on-premise, right?
Yes and no, because our cloud service is based on the on-prem product as well that we're hosting for our own customers, right? So we have to ensure that on-prem product that either end customer use or partner resells or we put in the cloud go through software development lifecycle, have the security features built in. Everything has to go under control.
Okay, that's fair. And the other question, Sangeeta, maybe you can answer this, or Elaine, is we have the SOC 2 audit right now on Claris Connect, one of our cloud properties. We don't yet have SOC 2 specifically for FileMaker Cloud at this time. Sangeeta, do you want to talk about that for a moment, what that means or why? And
Sure. So we got our first product, which is Claris Connect, and obtained the SOC 2 Type 2 report. But Claris is making continuous investments in other products, and we are also making investments in FileMaker Cloud at this time.
Let me ask that question in a slightly different way to Elaine, which is that can a customer, Elaine, your teams work on all of our cloud services, right?
Yes.
So if we have successfully passed the audit on Connect, although we haven't focused on the cloud controls, but it's the same team, it's the same processes, you can make an inference that it's the SOC 2 is really about Claris, the company, and how we operate as much as it is about the technology we provide. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
And just to add to that is, Andrew, the controls that are in Claris Connect that got the report are the similar controls that are in cloud. So we have had requests from customers, FileMaker Cloud customers, that are looking for SOC 2 reports. And when we talk to them about that there are similar controls and they can find comfort if they see the Claris Connect report, and they were satisfied by getting that Claris Connect report.
Right on. Thank you for that. Now we are committed, though, as you said, to an ongoing process of evolving our platform. I guess, Elaine, the question for you is having this audit now doesn't guarantee us, an audit success next year. Like the threat landscape changes, our technology changes, so we have to continue to invest here. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, definitely, right. We have to keep up with everything, right? All the ransomware, like Chris was saying, that there are new things identified, new vulnerability identified. We cannot sleep well, without having this thing. We continue to monitor this and keep up, keep to the current vulnerability. We well operate within Apple's security framework. We adhere to the same policies and processes and work very closely with Apple InfoSec, especially when there's security incident identified or even potential threat or attack. That we sit down together, we talk to each other, we try to assess the potential impact, and if there was something that we identify, we work on the remediation together. So, and it's a continuous process, so we assure that we can continue to be meeting the requirements, going through the future audits, and not just, say, hey, we got this report, we're happy. No, that's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the story.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for that. I recall hearing in one of our meetings that a SOC 2 report is a credential largely respected, I guess, in the United States, but carries a lot of weight and gravity with customers. From our customer and partner standpoint, like what does it mean to us, Sangeeta? I think what I'm led to believe is, the New York Stock Exchange has a SOC 2 report, is my understanding. So large enterprises understand what it is, what it means, and it gives them a lot of assurance and trust in the vendors that they're working with. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's and speaking of the assurance, it's like the two sides of the coin. On one side, for Claris, it demonstrates our ongoing commitment to rigorous security controls for maintaining the customer data through third-party attestation and certificates. Whereas on the other side, it is an assurance to the customers that someone independent of Claris or Apple have performed an attestation, have performed an assessment against a globally recognized standard and issued a certificate or an attestation report. Now, what we have seen is many businesses, especially the enterprise customers, require a SOC 2 report or ISO certification even before engaging with the service organization. And you must have seen, Andrew, that many of the IT teams, the vendor assessment risk or the risk management teams need to sign off for adopting a SaaS solution. So this gives that assurance and the confidence that the service organization has all the security controls in place in handling their data.
Yeah, I used to work on the sales team for Claris and FileMaker Inc. And in the field, we had a number of customers, usually, generally speaking, the larger enterprise customers that would ask for questionnaires to do an assessment of our security profile. And for them, the SOC 2 report is essentially the answer to that. We can provide it, and it shows them that we've got the controls and the coverage. Okay, awesome. We've talked a lot about SOC, and we're about halfway through. So we probably should move on from that a little bit as we start thinking about what it means to the customer. Where should we go next? Chris, let me chat with you. What does SOC 2, how can it help you? What does it mean to you, particularly given that a lot of our customers are actually using the Claris platform on-premise?
So I think there's a couple different ways to go with that. You know, a few years ago, back when Claris first went to the AWS infrastructure, a lot of people started reading up on AWS, and they have a shared security responsibility model. And so a lot of people are familiar with that notion. And so I think that applies here, you know. So one, having this SOC 2 framework with security, availability, confidentiality, process integrity, and privacy, that's a great sort of checklist to start with and say, okay, here are the bases that need to be covered. You know, you can have a variety of players in our customers. So typically it's, you know, one of the Claris partners. Sometimes it's just an in-house person. Sometimes it's hosted. Sometimes it's not. A lot of our customers have a couple of in-house IT resources, and then they outsource it to a managed service provider. And so just sort of knowing who the players are and who's going to cover what. Typically, you know, the Claris partner or in-house person would cover the security piece of that, and often part of the availability piece of that, making sure the thing stays up and is, you know, running well. But, you know, the other aspect of this is that this is, you know, kind of an important checkbox item for the IT providers. So when we're dealing with either in-house IT or managed service providers, this matters a lot to them. And sometimes it even matters to our customers' customers. So they might have some sort of agreements in place that require them to have certain security precautions. So it's important to them as well. And as I said, it's a good jumping off point for discussing areas of responsibility and who gets to cover them, because, you know, it's a group effort.
Yeah, shared responsibility is I think the important term there that you've introduced into this dialogue. And you know, we have a shared responsibility where we have dependencies upstream, I guess, if you will, on technology providers like Apple and Amazon, right? But then as we provide our services out there, our software, Koen, you do hosting services. Help us understand your perspective on shared responsibility to secure our environments.
We organize as well the shared responsibility model. So we have a dedicated team that only has access to the environment, yeah? and the developers don't have access to that environment. And just like the most cloud providers, the team does not have access to the application, because the application should not be accessed by a hosting provider. It's the data of the customer, it's the responsibility of the customer, and should not be seen by a hosting provider. So the hosting provider has the obligation to protect, in fact, the environment, to have a safe infrastructure for the customer. But the customer has a responsibility as well. He has to secure his solution. He has to secure his application. And securing is not only about a login and a password. It's also what your users are doing with your application. So if your application is providing an export and the user is doing the export of personal data, then you have to educate your users how to, and train your users what to do with it, and not just share it with everyone or put it on certain places that are there. And this is the responsibility of the owner of the data, where the Claris partners can help and advise on this.
Yeah, that's that rings very true to me. As you know, an Apple company, Claris gets regular employee-based training and compliance trainings on how we can interact and behave with data. Right? Apple is very privacy focused, and so we have strict rules on our ability to work with customer data. Right? We can't just throw it in a spreadsheet and share it around in an email. That's like a firing offense. So you know, that kind of policy-driven training for employees is pretty critical. And Sangeeta, that's something we do here quite a lot, right?
Yes, absolutely. And all the employees at Claris, being an Apple company, we go through the security training all year round. And we adhere to the Apple's security standards and the industry standard policies related to how to, you know, some of the examples, how to protect the device and the data, the password security management, access management, and being aware of all the threat landscape. currently, and especially because of the COVID-19 situations. So yes, privacy and security is in our DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been recently getting some internal trainings around Zoom bombing, right? We have to lock up our meetings now because people are crashing into them, or that the potential threat is out there, right? So it's you have to stay on top of it. Chris, when you were presenting with Heidi Porter and Wim at Pause on Error, you'd start to talk about kind of best practices that to me mimicked isn't the right word. They sounded an awful lot like what Elaine does for our cloud properties, right? In how you manage your infrastructure to understand your baseline performance and watch for deviations and then address them. Can you talk a little bit about that, where you guys are thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, Wim is a big advocate of know your baseline, know your normal. And so to do that, you have to have some kind of infrastructure in place to not just keep track of, a specific machine. A lot of us are familiar with Zabbix and having some monitoring on a FileMaker server, but you need to have kind of a more holistic view of what's going on in your network. And, the way malware typically spreads is it starts on one machine, does some privilege escalation, and then tries to move sideways and get at other devices. And so the types of events that you're looking for can often be spread across multiple servers. And so to really kind of pick up on that, you need to do server log aggregation. And so a great tool for doing that is a SIEM, Security Incident and Event Management piece of software. And there's several vendors out there. And I think we're going to be pasting some links into the chat as well. And so this will enable you to see something like, hey, someone just, increased their privileges on this machine. Then this domain user went and set up a local account over here, and it just gave itself the ability to, look at a hidden share. Individually, these things might not seem like much or maybe a blip, but if you take them in the aggregate, then they look alarming. And so the detection is a big thing. I don't think a lot of FileMaker developers are familiar with, this level of, this tool set. And then once you have detected something going on, it's great if, ransomware attackers are notorious for waiting for a 3-day weekend or a holiday or something like that and say, hey, 6 o'clock on a Friday, time to roll. And so then you trigger the attack when everybody doesn't want to answer their phone or heading out of town or whatever it is. And so you need something that can, be your proxy and take action if necessary, unattended. And so for that, there's security orchestration automation response. It's a SOAR is the acronym for that. And so I think we as a community should probably get familiar with some of these tools. Just, it's sort of an ancillary set of knowledge that we need to have to be able to protect a FileMaker deployment, but it's great for the entire organization.
Right on. I know that we've also talked about, as you're talking about SIEMs and SOARs and these sort of these software tools, I guess, for monitoring and responding, many of our small business customers don't have IT at all, right? So in terms of shared responsibility, is it something a FileMaker consulting developer should help provide? Is it something one would get from a different vendor? Like, where do they go? Where does our small business customer go?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think our role is often that of trusted advisor. And so, it's our job to keep our ear to the ground and help people out who don't have the bandwidth to stay on top of this stuff. I mean, right now, the number one source of malware and ransomware attacks is still phishing. And so phishing awareness training is huge. There are multiple vendors out there. I know several in the community are using a vendor called KnowBe4, which basically will stage, orchestrated phishing, not attacks, but simulations against an organization to see how many people bite. And then you have another round of training and say, okay, what were our percentages and how do we do better at this? And so that sort of awareness raising, I think, is huge. And, that's certainly something, while we wouldn't conduct that sort of thing, to be able to advise clients to look at some of these tools and programs is, I think, important.
Thank you. That totally makes sense. Kuhn, let me ask you a question that I'll dance around carefully because I'm the guy in marketing at Claris, right? And I don't want to sound like I'm selling the audience, but I think it's when I turn on my phone every day, like, so once a week or so, I get updates that automatically happen to it. And most of the updates are really about security. Is it important that our customers stay current with software from a security perspective?
Staying up to date is crucial. Staying up to date with the latest versions of FileMaker, with not only FileMaker, also operating system. having officially supported versions. So don't work anymore in versions that are not supported by Claris anymore. And update your machines. So because it's not only the server side you have to protect, but also the client side and the user side. Second to that, what we often forget is most of the FileMaker solutions are not standalone. They are connecting with APIs, making use of JavaScript libraries, and so on. And they have to be up to date as well. One of the nice things about Claris Connect, for instance, is that Claris is doing this for us. They're keeping up with the latest API calls, doing the security for us. We don't have to bother about secrecy management, about the tokens. That's all handled by Claris Connect. So if you doing things up to date on Claris, don't forget all the things that are around or the Claris products as well. And it's a continuous investment, in fact.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you say about Connect there. It goes to the advantages of sort of cloud economies of scale. If we can remain current in one place that serves a large swatch of customers and developers, rather than all of them duplicating that effort across our ecosystem, there's real economic value there, right? So, thank you. Appreciate your response on that. Elaine, if it's about staying current, I just wanted to share that I believe that over the last 12 months or so, there have been well over 100 updates to our software platform. Is that correct? Oh, you have you on mute.
Yeah, sorry. We're constantly releasing the new features and keeping up with the patches and vulnerabilities. So we do that, right? So and we hope that our customers feel a sense of security around that.
Yeah, I think delivering updates out to our on-premise customers, we have to do that a little bit more discreetly, and so it happens fewer times a year. And yet still, there have been easily half a dozen updates to Pro, I think, in the last 12 months. But for our cloud properties, we can update those mostly in almost real time, right? You're providing security patching along the way, invisible to our customers for the most part, but it is happening to keep us secure.
Exactly.
Awesome. Very nice. So, man, we've covered a lot of ground here today. I'm trying. I know that we've been providing a lot of links in the chat to some of the things that we're talking about. Chris, I'd like to start with you, I guess. What's a good way for us to stay current on this stuff? Like, where do we go to learn about it, stay on top of it in our community, and maybe share our wisdom with each other?
So I think obviously Claris Community is a good place to start as people find things, they generally post them there. But one sort of beneficial side effect of the pandemic is that a lot of user groups that historically had been always in person became virtual. And so worldwide, there are user groups that are now virtual and even hybrid. And Egbert Friedrich of .fmp fame in Berlin has actually gathered a public calendar that subscribes to everybody's meetups. And you can actually subscribe to this. I think I sent the link to Rosemary. She might be able to post it. And so there's a ton of sharing that, I mean, I've never felt closer to the FileMaker community than I have, over the course of the pandemic. We've been attending meetups all over the place in the UK, all over the country. And so it's been a nice sense of community, but also there's been much more rapid movement of information around the whole Claris ecosystem. So it's really nice to sort of hear what people are running into and find out what's going on. And so I would absolutely advocate for people to jump on, as many meetups as they have time for, because you get a ton of content. And then just as far as if you just want to sort of sniff the wind on, what's going on in the information security community, just go to Twitter and do a keyword search for InfoSec, and you'll find tons of people to follow, and it'll give you a good idea of what's sort of going on out there.
Right on. Thank you. Yeah, I think community has been a resource of tremendous value over the years. Have to give a quick shout out to attendee today, Mr. Stephen Blackwell, who's been a stalwart voice about the threat landscape and its evolution over the years. But yeah, the presentation that you and Heidi and Wim did, as you guys are talking more about this at developer groups and other forums, we really appreciate the information, right? The knowledge that you guys are sharing, and I hope we get to do more of it in community for sure. Kuhn, do you have a perspective on this? Ways for us to implement and stay on top of best practices as a community?
Yeah, and also share it on the Claris community. We have a great community at the Claris website, so we have to share what we know with everyone and staying up to date. Yeah.
It's a good imperative. We all should commit. One thing that we skipped over, we're about 45 minutes in, but one thing we skipped over, I didn't mention, we talked a lot about SOC. We didn't even mention the ISO certifications. And SOC, I think I said, was more emphasized in the United States, as I understand it, but internationally, the ISO certifications maybe have more relevance. Koen, do you have a perspective on that?
Yes, ISO is more known in Europe, and it's not a document; it's a certification, and it's also something you have to continuously work on. It's not a one-time shot, but it's you have to improve your policies. And what I see, especially the last couple of years, is that a lot of FileMaker projects where people, long-standing projects, where people leaving the company, where they become mission critical, are re-evaluated by IT departments or by external IT departments who used to be in the Microsoft environment. If you start talking about them, they re-evaluating, should we do that further in Claris or not? And if they don't know the tool, if you don't have any certifications or whatever, and it's an unknown tool for them, it does not become a serious product. And now with the certifications, even on-prem, it will help us to sell better this transition to from shadow IT to officially supported IT.
Yeah, this goes back to your earlier comment about the sort of unintended consequence of pandemic. As we're redeploying to have wide area network access or cloud-based access for our systems, we are coming out of the shadows in shadow IT and need to be redeployed, so the greater scrutiny is there. Sangeeta, can you put some definition around the ISO certifications and what they mean and how they differentiate from SOC?
Absolutely. So ISO stands for International Standards Organization. And first, I would like to say the two products that got the ISO certifications are both FileMaker Cloud and Claris Connect. They got the ISO certifications ISO 27001 and ISO 27018 under the Apple Services umbrella. So which means if you go to the Apple security compliance site, you will see FileMaker Cloud and Claris Connect as named services under the ISO of Apple. With that, now what do we mean by the ISO 27001? ISO 27001 is the world's most recognized information security management system certification that basically talks about handling of information security. So ISO 27001 covers 11 security domains composed of 114 controls. And guess what? Claris scopes in all the 114 controls. So some of these domains are physical and environment security, human resource security, which you were talking about earlier, the trainings that we go through, all the employees, they are all listed as part of ISO certification as well as SOC 2. And then as well as operational management, business continuity management, access management. So there are a lot of on the principles and on the security domains, there are a lot of similarities between the SOC 2 as well as, the ISO 27001 certification. Now going on to the ISO 27018, it is a code of practice to protect personal identifiable information, that is the PII data. And to get the ISO 27018, you need to have the ISO 27001 in place, which means the 27018 covers all the security domains and controls of 27001, plus the additional privacy-related controls for ISO 27018. And these privacy-related controls and the domains are, the consent and getting the consent and the choice of the user, how we are collecting minimum information for the personal PII data, how we use retain and have been completely transparent on the usage of the data. So these are some of the things that are covered in the data privacy.
Awesome. So we've used a lot of words to describe what SOC and ISO mean, but for our customers, really, it's just an assurance. It's an ability to trust the platform that we're doing all the right stuff. And for our partners who are selling to new customers, they can communicate with those customers that, yeah, Claris has got these attestations and certifications, and our in-house developers who need to prove to their boss or an IT department that Claris is the right tool for them to use. These should be almost check marks, right? Like, they got it, Claris is on it, we can trust it, let's move
Yeah,
forward.
absolutely. And to add to that, when we have this partners that are working with their customers, they can demonstrate, and they are doing the SaaS solution or the hosting, they can demonstrate that the underlying components that are being delivered by Claris are all secured, and that Claris also invests heavily on the security, on the certifications, on the reports. It's more like the relationship that we have with AWS. So what we did for our SOC 2 is we had to get the SOC 2 reports of AWS and ISO, because Claris is built on top of, Claris Cloud is built on top of AWS. So we leverage a lot of the AWS services. So we have to get the SOC 2 reports and the ISOs from AWS, and our auditors could, so that our auditors could rely on those services. And then we got our separate ISO certifications and the SOC 2 report.
Right on. So you're leading to something that we just got some questions in from Tom that maybe Elaine, you can answer. I'll put you on the spot, and if you can't answer for whatever reason, that's fine. Please beg me off. I know there's some secrets we can't share, but the questions are: can you talk about how Claris is managing access to encryption passwords for our cloud databases? So let's start there.
Yeah, so there are different aspects of that and different layers of security, right? For people who trust their data with us, right? First, some customers, they have their own keys and passwords, right? We cannot see their data at all, right? So even though they're leaving their data in our hands, it's totally secure. And then they're like in transit and at rest. We use AWS services, and everything's vetted by Apple's information security. So
that goes to part of our shared responsibility from Amazon, if I understand that right, because their key services are what we're using, and we can't see a customer's password, right?
Right.
Awesome. How about the data that moves through Claris Connect? That's another part of that question. Like, do we have access? Can our support team jump in and see a customer's data that's in the Connect platform?
We can't. Yeah, we have very tight control of access.
Yeah, good.
So,
okay. I hope that the simple answer is the right one there. Very nice. Yes, ma'am.
There's one thing that I'd like to add, that and we talked about the opt-in. There is an opt-in option for the customer in Claris Connect, where they can specify whether they want to keep the history of the logs, and which for debugging purposes and others.
Okay, so that they need to be aware of that the data is there for that purpose. Okay, thank you for that clarification. One question that came in related to SOC that maybe you can answer while we got you, Sangeeta, is SOC 2. Presumably there's a SOC 1. Like, what would the difference be between a SOC 2 and a SOC 1?
So the SOC 1 is more for the financial regulations, and SOC 2 is more for the technology and the cloud services. Now, within SOC 2, we have the type 1 and the type 2. So we got the SOC 2 type 2 report, whereas there is a SOC 2 type 1. Now, SOC 2 type 1 is about the design of the internal controls that exists in a service organization at a specific point of time, whereas the SOC 2 type 2 is about the design and the operating effectiveness of the internal controls over a given period of time, which is minimum 6 months. And that's the difference.
Right on. Kun, we have another question coming in that I think goes to shared responsibility that we were talking about before, but it's how do these assurances and certifications that Claris is getting relate to the use of plugins, right? And I think there is clearly a shared responsibility equation, right? How do you feel about that one?
First of all, plugins is the same as if you would use JavaScript or other things. So the plugins are in the first place not in Claris Cloud, in FileMaker Cloud, so you have to do it on premise. It's together with the vendor. You have to stay up to date with your plugins as well, and then you have to check with your vendor what they support, if the plugins still support, and what they offer. But of course, the plugin can access data.
It's a similar domain to the responsibility of the users and the owner of the databases, et cetera, right? So one has to be cognizant of the whole formula, if you will, right? Okay. Elaine, we have a question around penetration testing. And I don't know, again, if you're able to answer, but how does Claris or an independent third party pen test our platform? What can we say about that?
My answer is yes, and I only want to say that much.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think, I guess implicit in our shared responsibilities with our parent company and how we provide this, one can expect that some of these things are a given, but I know we can't talk about all the details all the time.
Yeah, but what I can say is, yes, we do have pen tests, and then there was pen tests conducted by external independent companies.
Okay. Thank you so much. We're coming up on the top of the hour, so we've about exhausted our 60 minutes. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. And so first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Sangeeta and Elaine, for coming out to talk to us. Elaine, I think probably a lot of people are excited to meet you, right? Anytime we get to hear it from the engineering team, what's going on, it gives me, I have a better understanding now of how our DevOps team is working and your responsibilities. So I'm sure that extends to our audience. So thank you so much for joining us. And Sangeeta, you've been a champion for security in our platform and advancing us to keep us relevant and modern and in a good place. So really appreciate your vision and leadership and joining us again today to put some definition around some of these new ideas and certifications that we're getting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cohen, you're coming here at a later hour of the day, but you've been such a willing participant in this dialogue. You are a great voice last year as well as this one to help us understand some good perspectives. And I love the breadth of your exposure to the platform and from the customers all the way to Claris and hosting in between. Listerius has been a great partner, but thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Welcome.
And Chris, my old friend, we've only known each other for about 30 years. It's like we just met. But, I think the presentation that you did again a couple of weeks ago with Heidi, with Wim, really kind of piqued my interest a lot to re-engage with this topic. I hope it's done the same with the audience. Hopefully we scared the pants off of people a little bit, but we're giving them some confidence that there are ways we can go into the future with a positive coverage on this. I know for the audience, I didn't get to every single question. There was a great thread with Otto. Thank you, Otto. We will take that home and share it with the product teams as well. I appreciate your advocacy there. There were a couple other questions we couldn't get to on new and different types of certifications. Be assured that we'll be evaluating those as we move forward to get the best security and assurance footprint out there that we can for our customer base. So, and if there's any questions I missed that we can, excuse me, carry forward into community, we'll carry the dialogue over to there as well. So thank you all for joining today. And Rosemary, I don't know if there's anything we need to do to close out, but I appreciate you hosting us today.
So first, thank you again, Andrew, and to all the panelists for your engaging and informative conversation today. And just want to remind everyone that in just about half an hour, Kate Waldhauser from Portage Bay Solutions and the Claris Connect user group will be talking about connecting clients to Claris Connect. It's another great session that goes to how you can expand your own consulting toolkit with Claris Connect. And then don't forget, coming up in November, we've got 2 more sessions in Claris Engage Beyond on November 16th. First, the future of the Claris platform with Robert Holsey and Peter Nelson and other people from Claris. And then following that, Vince Manano from Beeswax will talk about the value and benefits of transactions as you deploy FileMaker applications. And as Andrew said, we'll be getting all the links I shared and many others into the session wrap-up that I'll post in community later this week. And we'll also come back and try to answer the questions we couldn't get to. And finally, please, please, please complete the survey. The link is on screen right now, and I think we dropped it in the chat at the beginning of the session. It's your feedback that helps us improve both the Claris Engage Beyond experience, and we're also starting to use that feedback as we plan for future Claris Engage live events next year. So again, thank you all, and we hope to see you again in about 30 minutes.